Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to Passive Income MBA Real Estate Syndication Investing. I'm so excited to have my friend on today, David Coe. He's an amazing real estate professional, investor, developer. David, great to have you on.
Thank you, Suja. Great to be here. Appreciate you inviting me onto your show.
Of course. So, everyone, David is a realtor and investor who specializes in working with developers. David runs the COE Real Estate Group, which is based in the South Bay of Los Angeles. Besides being one of the top Keller Williams teams for residential sales in the South Bay, Co Real Estate also has a new construction division that specializes in selling infill residential projects in the greater LA area. As an investor, David is a partner in Capital Stack Investments. Capital Stack is focused on raising capital and investing in short and long-term residential new construction projects. David also founded the South Bay chapter of For Investors by Investors, otherwise known as Phoebe, a real estate investment club that is 100% focused on education and networking with absolutely zero sale pitches allowed. He's an avid hiker and a dang good cook. David, thanks so much for being on the show. Why don't you take us back in time and give us a little bit of color and history on where you started relative to real estate and how you got to where you are now?
Yes, we'll do. So, we actually started my real estate career working for corporate America, working in the advertising industry, which I didn't realize it at the time that that's what I was doing. But so, I worked in marketing and advertising for, almost 17 years. And in the mid 90s, I got transferred out to Atlanta and had a chance to buy our first house, right? Because pricing in Georgia was way less expensive than pricing here in California, even in the mid 90s. So we bought our first house before we had kids. All we did is worked on the house. We loved working on the house. We loved the physical part of changing something and creating something. And, ended up selling that house when we got transferred back to California for a really substantial profit. And we learned two things. I learned something about market timing, right? Because we bought at the right time. And then we also created value by fixing up the house. So we learned a lot about that. So when we had kids and our kids were starting to get older and doing cool things, and I was always on an airplane traveling and, just wanted to spend more time being a dad, so decided to get into real estate to basically have more freedom in my schedule, right? And the freedom that, being self-employed, being an entrepreneur allows. And because we had so much fun fixing and flipping our house in Atlanta, we actually started doing that full time. So that's how I got into real estate. I did get my license at the time, but it was purely to sell my own projects, not necessarily representing other people. This was in 2007, and in 2007 and 2008, we were having a grand old time fixing and flipping properties. In 2009 and 2010, it wasn't quite as fun. So early on, we had to learn how to adjust and how to expand. And, over the years, I've gotten involved in so many different aspects of real estate, everything in from, special, like one of the second things that I did in real estate besides fixing and flipping houses was really helping people invest in real estate using self-directed IRAs. So, a better use of their retirement accounts. I've gotten involved in the debt side of it, running a debt fund. We've gotten involved in a lot of out-of-state, a lot of in-state investing. And, through the years, I've also decided to do more with my real estate license. So, now I actually have a real estate team. I am part of Keller Williams. And then I also have this investing side of me, and that right now is focused on infill construction in Southern California, as you read in my bio. And there's a great intersection in those things, because there are projects that we are building that the team is actually selling. I love building out that model over, it's taken a long time to get here. But that's part of what I like about real estate is that it is very entrepreneurial, and you do get a chance to kind of, create your path with it, as long as you're responsible and doing the right things along the way.
Awesome. Yeah, you certainly have a wide breadth of experience in real estate. And I wanted to just touch on something that I think a lot of people think about, which is you mentioned it briefly, how you chose to pursue real estate to kind of have flexibility in your schedule. But it's still a lot of work to get started in real estate. So, did that kind of play out the way you hoped? Like, did you have the kind of flexibility that you wanted? What did you anticipate, and how did that compare to what actually happened?
Yes and no, right? Like it absolutely panned out. You know, at the very beginning, when all we were doing was fixing and flipping, we had complete control over our schedule. You know, I'd say over the years, as what I've gotten involved with has gotten more complex, you know, the demands on my time have also become more complex. You know, it's one of those things where I'm never working, but I'm always on, right? You're always, you never know where something's going to be happening, but there's really nothing that, you know, there's not really nothing that you have to do every single day. It's a bunch of things that you want to do or you need to do based on, you know, what those tasks are. So I'd say the part about being an entrepreneur that was unexpected was that freedom and that excitement of wanting to do things because they're your things, not someone else's things. I didn't really get that when I left. I thought I'd have a lot more time. You know, the downside to that is when you are doing those things that you have created, you're usually the only one that people can get information from, right? There isn't some big team, you know, although, you know, over the years we have certainly grown out teams. You know, yeah, early on, it was fantastic. And I'd say even now, the amount of time that I spend in my entrepreneurial real estate life is probably more time than I spent when I was working in corporate America, but the time is just so much more enjoyable.
Yeah, for sure. And then I also wanted to touch on something before we move more into what you're currently working on. What you mentioned about SD IRAs, self-directed IRAs, and in your experience, you mentioned that there are much better ways of people using their investment accounts. And can you just speak to that a bit? Like, what do you see as the primary benefits of having a self-directed IRA and investing in real estate as compared to what people were doing with those funds prior?
Well, I'd say a self-directed IRA allows you to invest in what you know, right? So it's not that real estate's right for everyone, but there's a lot of people out there that really enjoy investing in real estate and don't realize they can be using their retirement funds to invest in real estate. Now, in 2009 and 10 and 11, after we had this huge decrease in, you know, in stock, you know, in the stock portfolios, and so many people lost a huge amount of wealth because of that, you know, real estate kind of became you know, a respite for people, you know, to start moving money out of the traditional stock market and financial markets, you know, into something that had a lot more of a tangible, you know, asset associated with it. You know, the last really ever since then, the market's been on this great run. And, you know, I look, the market may correct at some point in time. It may not. Same thing with real estate. But real estate does a couple of things that stocks don't, right? Real estate can pay you income along the way. You know, stocks can sometimes too, and some dividends, but they're usually at much smaller levels. Real estate has the ability to get financed, right? So you can leverage to access real estate, which is something usually you can't do with a financial product. And, you know, just people that, you know, want to be a lot more hands-on, right? And I know you do a lot of investing on the syndicated side, but even that way, you get a lot more exposure to how your dollar's being invested than maybe you do if you're just, you know, purchasing blindly miscellaneous pools, right? That Fidelity or Vanguard say you should be investing in based on your age and based on whatever are the criteria, which is great for a lot of people. But for people that want a lot more control and want to feel like they can make a greater impact on their retirement, I think real estate offers that, and all of that's possible with retirement funds as long as you have the right kinds of accounts set up.
Yeah, for sure. I can definitely relate to, you know, just checking some boxes and, or having like a conversation with like a financial consultant when I was in corporate America, and then just being like, okay, well, I guess this is where all of my funds are being invested. I'll just trust that it's going to work out. Now that I know so much more about real estate and prefer the stability and predictability of it, it's definitely, it's something that a lot of people, I think, appreciate, is the opportunity to be able to control their retirement accounts. So thanks for speaking to that.
Yeah. And I'd say one more quick thing I'd add to that is back in the day, I think people if you would ask if you can invest your retirement account into real estate, your advisor was more likely to tell you you can't instead of we don't. Right. Mm-hmm. And that's the knowledge that most people had, is, oh, I can't do that. Well, you could, they just didn't tell you that. So I think that's a big part of it, is that just sharing with people that is possible is usually the first step. Once people know and they start running down that lead and they find out what you can do with it, it becomes a really powerful way to invest, your retirement account.
Such a good point, for sure. All right, David. So I want to hear about what you're up to right now. I mean, I find your strategy for infill development very interesting and compelling. And tell us a bit how you decided to do what you're doing. And, obviously you're in SoCal, so speak to that as well.
Yeah. Well, I'll say that it evolved because we wanted to figure out a way to invest in Southern California that we can make money. And, buying rental properties in Southern California, you can make money, but it's just not immediately, right? Just the prices are so high here, and it takes time to when you own a property, to where you can start feel like you're getting some legitimate cash flow on it. So part of it came from the fact that, we wanted to own and invest in Southern California. And really the only way you could find a deal in California was to create it, right? You had to build it. It's the only way that you can get something consistently that's under market in California, is by building it, right? So it's what we call the ultimate value add strategy, is what development is. And, the reason why I think we're doing it here in California is we just see there being a huge opportunity for younger millennial people that are what is driving this crazy real estate market right now, right? We've got two things happening in the market. And I think these are trends that are going to continue for the next, at least the next 5 years, if not longer, is that you have this massive amount of young, educated, wealthy individuals that are just hitting the phase of their lives where they're getting married, they're having children, and they're starting their journey on home ownership, right? So that's usually everyone's first real estate investment, is their own home. And if that's not your first investment, it should be, right? You should buy a house. That's always the first piece of advice I give to someone. It's a great way to learn about real estate. So, we see there being this opportunity because a lot of those people are moving to Southern California, that we've got all these great jobs, in the legal space, professional services, engineers. I mean, I live here in the South Bay of Los Angeles, which basically means if I swing a rock on a stick, I either hit another realtor or I hit an engineer in the head, right? There's a lot of them here in the South Bay because there's all kinds of jobs here, and we just got this, this economy that has all these great jobs for younger people. So even though people are leaving California, there are just as many people or almost as many people coming here, but we're losing older and younger people that are less educated and less employed. And we're gaining younger, more educated, more affluent people that are coming for these high paying jobs, and they buy houses. So we see there being an opportunity. There's a huge shortage of housing everywhere in the country, not just here in Southern California, but it's exacerbated here in Southern California for many reasons, which I'm sure we'll talk about. So we just see that as being a market opportunity, and we want to get in front of that and invest and try to deliver houses to young millennials.
Yeah, that's awesome. You kind of touched on this, but I was wondering if you could expand on this sort of idea that people are leaving California. I know that, it sounds like people are leaving. So you're saying potentially older people are leaving and people who are younger and maybe not as affluent, but that California is still a huge magnet for millennials who are well educated and capable of getting high paying jobs. Is that a fair characterization?
Very fair characterization. And what I can tell you, like, one of the best examples is when I used to work in advertising, right? If you were a young art director, right, you were probably 32 years old and, making $225,000 a year. But if you wanted to work, you either had to work in New York or LA, right? That's the only place those advertising industries were. Now, over the years, you could move to other markets, but if that job ended and you got another job, more than likely you'd be moving back to one of those bigger cities. Um, you know, California, I mean, LA in particular, I think is the fourth largest GDP amongst metro areas in all of the world. And we have a lot of just those high paying jobs. So yeah, there's certainly this draw for that kind of home buyer here into this market. And we also get a lot of people from international cities, right? International countries, right? So, one of the things is while we may lose in migration, from people that are leaving California and going to Texas and going to Colorado, we are also gaining people coming from India and from Japan and from China. And those people don't always go to Boise, Idaho, right? They come to LA or they come to New York. So, when you look at the migration of people into California, it's way more complicated than I think. You have to look beyond just the direction of U-Haul truck rentals, right? Because someone who's moving here from Pakistan doesn't rent a U-Haul, right? It's a different experience. And that person coming here is probably an educated person who's coming to work in the aerospace industry. And, we probably lost someone who's waiting tables, who can do that anywhere in the country and probably wants to do that someplace where the cost of living is a lot less. So
Yeah.
I think that's the complexity of the California market. And we see that being still a long-term opportunity.
Yeah, for sure. That makes a lot of sense. And I think you painted a good picture there. So, David, tell us what you're actually building about the footprint, just because I find that so fascinating.
So we've got a couple of projects right now that we're involved in. Most of them are, we do residential is probably the first thing to say. So we're not doing office, we're not doing retail, we're not doing industrial. We like building houses or residences of some kind. We've been involved in a lot of small lot subdivisions, which basically are single family homes that are just built super close to each other. So picture a 1,800 square foot home on a 920 square foot lot, right? So they're tall and they're it's dense in a small little area, and that's a lot of what we do. What infill means is that you're not going out and buying 10 acres of farmland and building, large estates and big houses and having to run services. We're tearing down old, dilapidated inventory in the LA area, and then we're putting new construction in its place. So, one of the projects that we're working on right now is a 27 unit project in North Hollywood. And that was 5 lots that used to have 13 different residences on it. And we have now subdivided those 5 lots into 27 lots that now have single family homes on them. And the people that are buying that type of property are millennials. They're tall, right? So they have many flights of stairs. Older people don't want to live in vertical. They want to live more horizontal. The price point is a price point that is attractive for people that are first-time home buyers. The design is very modern. There's a lot of new technology that goes into what we build. We try to put as much green features into our homes as we can. And, the idea of living in a community of other like-minded people, I think is also attractive for that buyer. So, a lot of times that'll look like, that kind of density for single family homes. We've also done some and have invested in some 4-unit buildings. We like that 2 to 4 unit space, and even some small apartment buildings. Brand new construction apartment buildings are great to own. And again, it's hard to do value add here in Southern California. Maybe you can buy some old dilapidated building in Long Beach and turn it around and get it cash flowing in a couple of years. but you're still going to have an old dilapidated building, right, in Long Beach, versus you can spend that same couple of years, build something brand new. And we think long-term, the rent growth on that, certainly the maintenance cost of that, makes for a much more successful real estate investment long-term.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I just love that you've committed to this development. We know how much of a housing shortage there is in California and the states in general. And so the fact that you're adding units and taking dilapidated housing stock and making it new and modern and also more space efficient is just it's very commendable. It's very inspiring. And we're not going to solve the housing crisis just by simply by just renovating old housing stock. So
the only way to solve the housing crisis in California and any other city in the world is you have to generate more housing. It's the only way to do it. Everything else that you do around that will somewhat orbit around the idea of creating more housing, right? As a population, we continue to grow. It's just the natural ebb and flow of humanity, right? 10 years from now, we're going to have a lot more people on the face of the earth. And if we're not constantly creating new housing, we're going to constantly be in a situation where we have a housing crisis.
Definitely. So, when investors think about development, they're often thinking about that it's higher risk and higher reward. Would you say that is accurate in your experience doing development? Like, how would you sort of put that into the whole risk versus reward conversation?
I would completely agree. It is absolutely it's more complex. It's got many more moving parts. It's and it needs to have larger returns. That's a very important part of it. The philosophy on investing, my philosophy has always been you have to start with thy in mind, right? Like, what is it that you're trying to accomplish when you're investing in real estate? Development is completely wrong for some people, right? Because they don't have a high risk tolerance, and you shouldn't be investing in things no matter what the returns are if the ownership experience of being in that deal is one that every day you're just terrified that you made a bad decision and you're going to lose every penny that you've got into it. Development is for people that are willing to take a little higher risk, first of all, and then by taking that risk, they should be rewarded with higher returns. It doesn't make any sense to make a 12% IRR on a new construction deal when I can go make that on, a nice, easy performing asset in Texas or Tennessee or some other market. Why take the risk of that return? Why take the risk of that project, if I'm not going to get rewarded for it? So that's part of when we're structuring a deal, working with the builders that we work with, is we want to make sure that the structure is one that rewards investors for taking the extra amount of risk they're going to take. And while, again, we think that our projects are riskier than some, that's part of what we do, is how do we mitigate that risk as much as we can, and that's what every investor tries to do. But in development, we just have a lot more risk to mitigate, and we can't mitigate everything, right? There's a lot of unknowns that happen in all real estate investing, but I think development certainly has more of it than most. So that's, I think, our role in that is trying to make sure the returns are where they need to be, and then try to make sure that the investment is performing in a way that generates those returns.
Makes total sense. Thanks. Another thing I wanted to touch on before we start wrapping up is I know that your Phoebe group, your For Investors by Investors group, and just networking in general has been a huge part of your real estate journey. Will you speak to a bit about what impact hosting this group has had on you, and on what you think the benefits of it have been?
Well, my philosophy is that real estate is not a property business, it's a people business. And the only way, the actual tagline for our Phoebe group is there's no I in real estate. And I thoroughly believe in that. I thoroughly believe that the quality of investor you become will be directly correlated to the quality of people you get connected to. So for me, Phoebe has been the way that I've been able to get connected to quality people. And then it also has provided a format to allow me to build relationships with those people, from a fundraising perspective, which is really that's my main role in development, right? I'm not always sourcing the property. I'm not designing the building. I'm not constructing the building. But what I am doing is I'm helping to raise the capital and trying to make sure that the projects that we're bringing onto our platform are projects that have a high probability to succeed, and then making sure they're properly funded. So, that's my job in this. And the way you do that is by meeting people, right? And building credibility with them and building trust with them, performing. And then hopefully, in the long term, you have what every business wants, which is repeat business, right? So, the Phoebe has provided an opportunity for me, I think, to learn a lot, right? Because every single meeting, I always learn something, even if it's on a subject that I've heard people present on 100 times. There's always a little new fact or tidbit of knowledge that you gain, by attending, which I always have to attend because I run it. And then more importantly, there's the chance to continue to or deepen relationships with people that you already know and make relationships with people that you don't.
Awesome. Thanks. Well, I definitely know from experience as well that networking is just such a critical part of the investing in real estate game. I love the tagline, there's no I in real estate. David, thank you so much for coming on. I know we could talk a lot longer, but for right now, let's just shine a spotlight on you. Tell the listeners how they can get a hold of you and anything else you'd like to share.
So thank you again for having me. I truly appreciate it. To learn more, go to capitalstackinvestments.com. And one of the things that if you want to join our investor list, there is a place where you can sign up to do that. But if you just want to join our mailing list, one of the things that we do is we have written these lessons, all these different lessons that we've learned throughout the years of investing. So if you sign up, basically you'll get a lesson every 2 weeks on everything from development to single family housing, to running debt funds, to investing with self-directed IRAs, just all these different lessons over the years. We kind of written them out, and you'll get copies of those lessons. So if you're interested in learning more, go to capitalstackinvestments.com and sign up for our lessons from 50 deals.
Awesome. Well, we'll make sure to have that in the show notes. David, thank you so much for coming on. Can't wait to see you next time, and I'll see you later.
All right, Suja, thank you.